Complaint in our last special meeting of the city is none of the votes were announced at the end. Nobody knew what happened.
Exactly right.
We're just talking about that.
Our chair missed all.
Guys, I'm not starting the meeting with Al gone. He had to go to
We're like, what the hell happened? And they even asked in the question period, but nobody answered them.
Michelle, you'll start off first to get the election of the chair. Yeah.
Just because somebody
I'll get the words right
or makes a speech during the question period doesn't really.
can we turn off Roger's video feed?
Did anybody ask her?
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I just expected someone to answer that question at the end of the meeting, and no. If I could have, but being at a
Question.
period where the person
All right,
said that they didn't know what the results.
Thank you, everybody.
were.
Oh yeah.
Director Elliott.
Order.
Sorry. Yes, sorry.
Thank you, everybody. We are now in I'm Michelle Jones. I'm the corporate officer for the qathet Regional District, and I will call this January 2024 qathet Regional District Finance Committee to order. The first item of business is election of the chair. So I will first call upon the members of the assembly for nominations for position of the chair. I'll call the first time, Director Brander.
Thank you. I'd like to nominate Director Paul.
Director Paul, you've been nominated for position of the chair. Do you accept this nomination?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Director Paul is accepted. So I will call a second time for nominations for the position of chair. Hearing none, I will call a third and final time for nominations for the position of chair. Hearing none, Director Paul, you've been you have received the position of chair by acclamation, and I'll hand over chairing this meeting to you.
Okay, thank you, corporate officer. So we've already been called to order. I'd like to first acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tla'amin Nation, as well as all Coast Salish First Nations on whose traditional territories we have the honor to live, including my home on Ho'e'ete, also known as Laskiti Island. We have some, the next item is approval of the agenda, and we have some, before I put it up for vote, we have some significant items on the agenda, and we all want a robust debate on these items. So I encourage members to be concise so that we can get through this hopefully within 3 hours before our board meeting. So we have an agenda. Would someone like to move approval? Okay, Director Lennox, seconded by Director Gisborne. Is there any debate? No. Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Okay, approval of the agenda. Now we're on to adoption of the minutes. Are there any changes or omissions anyone would like to make, or a move to adopt them? Director Gisborne, Director Lennox, is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Okay, very good. We have, as far as I understand, no delegations unless there are anyone in the room there.
Would you like to be a delegate?
I'm presenting item 4.
Okay, we have no unfinished business. We have one item of correspondence, but it doesn't look like there's anything in it unless someone would like to pull something out of it. Okay, so that gets us on to reports. So the first big item we have is our financial plan 8.1 2024-2028 draft 2, and I will hand it over to our manager of financial services, Ms. Greenan, because she probably has some words for us before we get going. Ms. Greenan? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I do have a short presentation, and I did want to mention before I start the presentation that you might have noticed in this draft that the focus is more on the bigger picture, like the higher level, and I didn't include a lot of the expense items in the detailed financial plans, but I do have those available if anyone has any questions on the expense items. And the reason, like I said, for the change is just to focus the board's attention on the budget overall and the bigger picture. And I also have changed this presentation in order to focus on the changes. So I've tried to separate the changes that are due to simply inflationary increases, the status quo, operations as normal, plus inflationary increases. And then I've isolated the changes to the service levels. So there are some services that the service levels have increased. And then I'll outline what the rationale for those, the reason for those changes, what's driving those changes. So I'll share my screen now. So I'm pleased to present the budget draft 2 for the regional district.
Just 1 second. Through the chair. Linda, we're looking at your notes screen instead of the full page, page 1. So if you hit escape and share your screen again.
Okay.
And instead of selecting that one, you select the one next to it.
Is that the right one now?
No. So if you hit X up there, you can continue to share your screen, but we'll just use the other presentation, like the full screen module.
Okay.
So not that one, go over one. Select one to the.
Oh, it's the other one. Okay.
So
sorry, I thought I had the other one selected.
So instead of selecting presentation mode, you'll just select full screen mode. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah.
One over. Instead of where, yes, right there. Perfect.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. So I'm pleased to present draft 2 of the 2024 to 2028 financial plan. So the capital plans for the regional district have changed a little bit since draft 1. And that's just, we had some refinements in the budgets. So the regional capital plans are valued at approximately 4.23 million. And the largest items in the capital plan are, of course, the completion of the Resource Recovery Center and the Waste Transfer Station. There's replacement of a dump truck for the shared services. At Shelter Point, there are plans to renew the shower and washroom building at the main park. And in the cemetery, there's plans to replace the mausoleum and office roof and the HVAC system. Capital plans for the electoral areas are estimated at about 4.6 million. It's not a big change from draft 1, just some, like I said, some refinements in the numbers. And the plans there include the Northside Recreation Center upgrade and expansion, and that is 73% grant funded. On the Skiddy Island Volunteer Fire Department, there is a fuel storage tank to be installed and a covered structure for the tank. Sabre Island Volunteer Fire Department, there's replacement of engine 21 is planned to start in 2020, started in 2023 and then to be completed by 2025. Northside Volunteer Fire Department, replacement of engine 13 is planned to start in 2023 and be completed in 2025 as well. There's a rescue truck replacement, and the Fire Training Center is going to undergo some further work, which is grant funded. Myrtle Pond Water, there's a water line upgrade, and that is mostly funded by Community Works funding, but there's also some funding from the Myrtle Pond Water Service reserves. In the Lund sewer system, there is a SCADA system going to be installed in 2025. And at Gillies Bay, the tennis court is going to be resurfaced. So I just wanted to show you the 2024 requisition changes and outline where those changes come from. So this graph shows all of the services, and the blue line depicts the 2023 service level. So that was the cost of that service, or the requisition for that service in 2023. And then the yellow bar indicates inflationary increases. So 2023 service as usual plus inflationary increases to operate that service. And then the red bar indicates a service level increase. So there have been service level increases in a number of services. And you can see here, the first one is general administration had an $82,000 service level increase. A small increase in the regional parks service of $19,851. Regional emergency preparedness, $22,498. Emergency telephone 911, $3,142. Waste management, $1,272,266. Planning, $7,337. Development services, $1,242. Paratransit, $18,063. And then grants and aid, $18,777. The grants and aid service, the only reason for that service level increase is because we haven't yet posted the prior year surpluses. Once the prior year surpluses are posted, that should go down to zero so that they match the same level that was requisitioned in 2023. Liskeet Island Volunteer Library, there's a $2,790 increase in the level of service. And Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, $63,549. Liskeet Volunteer Fire Department, $62,412. And Northside Volunteer Fire Department, $4,647. And the parcel tax for the Merlecon Water Service has increased by $3,847 service over $3,847 over the usual operations as usual. And Texada Recreation Commission, about a $20,000 increase. Texada Marine, $135. And then Sabre Island Marine parcel tax has increased about $150,000. So this next slide just isolates the service level increases. And then now I'll go through and explain what's driving these increases. So in the general administration service, there's a service level increase of about $82,970. That is due to an increase in the short-term debt payments those debt payments will be repaid over 2024 through 2028. We've offset that increase by a decrease in the consultant budget of $115,500 and an increase to the administration recoveries. In the parks budget, there was a negotiated contractor increase of $24,000, but we've also had a decrease in the firewood budget because the firewood has built up over a couple of years. Regional emergency preparedness, there's about a $23,000 increase in the level of service. And that is an increase of $23,000 for contractor wages, greater than the grant funding that we are getting for that project. In the emergency 911, $3,142, and that is a service that is contracted through North Island 911. So we don't have too much control over those increases. Waste management, the increase over the general service level increases is, or over their inflationary increases, sorry, is $1.2 million. And that is, in 2024, we have the full debt payment. So that's a $585,000 increase. There will be staff wages and benefits for the new facility of $370,000 projected. And there's a net increase to the waste, recycling, and organics of $325,000 based on estimated contracts. In the planning service, there's a $7,337 increase. And in 2024, there's a reduction in the amount of projects that were funded by Community Works of $14,840. And then there's also been a corresponding reduction to the general expenditures and mapping and advertising and communications budgets. The Rural Paratransit Service, there's an $18,063 service level increase, and that is fully due to the service expansion. As I said, grants and aid, it's showing an $18,777 increase in the service level, but I think that once the prior year surpluses from the 2023 grants are recognized, we should reduce that to zero. So it's the same as last year. The Skiddy Island Library, about $2,790 based on Vancouver Island Regional Library's budget submission. In Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, there's approximately $63,549 of service level increases, and those are due to $21,562 increase in the training budget, $28,626 increase in the health and safety budget, and an increase in professional fees of $12,760. For the Lasqueti Volunteer Fire Department, the main drivers of the increase there's a $62,412 increase. The main drivers are the introduction of benefits for the volunteers and health and safety requirements of $32,832, and then a small increase in the vehicle gas and oil budget of $1,900. For the Northside Volunteer Fire Department, there is an increase of $3,847, and that is due to an increase in the health and safety budget of $28,161, and a corresponding decrease to the first responder supplies of $25,695. Just want to mention too that Tla'amin has let us know that they will no longer be having Northside respond to their lands and to the leasehold properties, and so that means that their contribution will decrease by approximately $112,000. So we'll look at that and then deal with that in draft 3 of the budget. Myrtle Pond Water, there's an increase of over and above the inflationary increases of $3,847, and all of that is going towards an increase in the reserve funds in order to replace their assets. Texada Recreation, there's a $19,258 increase, and that is to fund a study to repair or replace the 2 buildings, the community hall and the old school. And then in the Savory Island Marine, there was the Savory Island Marine Advisory Committee did request that we increase the requisition to that service in order to put more funding to the reserve, because we were falling behind on reserve fund contributions to fund the ongoing dredging and major repairs, and then ultimate replacement of that facility. And then there's some other changes. There's barge facility repairs and maintenance the budget's increased by $20,000. And the general repairs and maintenance has a corresponding decrease of $7,500. So what all of these changes and the budget at draft 2 means the following tax rates per $100,000 in 2024. So for the city of Paul River, they're looking at a tax rate of $84 per $100,000, and that's a change of $22 per $100,000. For the year. Area A, you're looking at $307 per $100,000, an increase of $36.40 for the year. And then Savory Island, $195 change for the year, an increase of about $27 per $100,000. Area B, $202 increase for the year, an increase of about $33 over 2020 per $100,000 over 2023. Area C, $209 per $100,000, an increase of about $33.30 per over 2023. Area D, it's about $213 per $100,000, an increase of about $32 per $100,000. And Area E, $291, an increase of $60 over 2023. So for an average home we've valued an average home based on the home within the city of Paul River, just so we have a consistent rate if we're comparing our rates with the city of Paul River's rates. And I did confirm with the CFO at the City of Paul River, and this is the same rate that they are using when they're doing their comparisons. So an average home, based on the 2023 revised roll values, we now have the 2024 completed roll values, but I haven't incorporated that into this draft. Those will be incorporated into draft 3. So an average home of $607,466 is the average cost will be approximately $509 for a home within the City of Paul River. Area A will be approximately $865 for an average home within Area A. And home within Savory Island, we'll be looking at about $1,182 in taxes. Area B, about $1,226 in taxes. Area C, $1,272. Area D, $1,296, and Area E, $1,767. And of course, everyone's home values are different, so it might be easier to use the cost per 100,000 when they're trying to do those calculations. So that ends my presentation. There will be a final draft presented on February 7th, and then planned adoption of the bylaw on February 28th. So I'll open the floor to any questions now, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Ms. Green. And so what I'll propose we do, because I expect everyone will have questions. I think if we went around maybe in clockwise order, and if you don't want to ask questions, don't. We'll do 1 or 2 rounds like this, and ask 2 or 3 questions each round if you have them, and make any motions for changes as you go. So why don't we start with Director Elliott, just because I can start for me to see, and I expect everyone's hands will go up. So Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. So one of the items that I think we need to do a really good job of explaining to the public and people is the huge increase in our waste management. So I know, and we've received several reports on things we know and things we don't know. And I understand that we're paying down debt, and that's a, $500,000 ticket. And that's the bulk of why it's gone up so much, because we just built a facility and now we have to pay for it. Some of the questions that people might like to understand better would be, so we're providing the same service, we're taking it away from a contractor and we're changing contractors and moving it to the new facility. So wages seem to have taken up a big chunk of that increase as well. Would we not be replacing some of the services that are delivered in a different way, and therefore receiving money back out of that in order to redirect it to this new way we're doing things? And so how much of those increased wages is because wages have gone up for the systems we're replacing, and how much is because we're just planning to collect more organics and we are increasing the service levels?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to direct that question to Arnold Schwab, the Manager of Asset Management and Strategic Initiatives, please.
Mr. Schwab?
Thank you, through the chair. I'm going to go into a bit of an explanation, and I am yet going to turn it over to one more person here. The first question about how much of that is sort of wages and how much is other things. We were adding 4 staff that essentially we never had before. So we are looking at a manager for the whole operation of it, a diversion specialist, and that's really coming as a requirement out of sort of provincial mandates of things that we really need to do. And we are adding 2 scale attendants. So, those are completely different positions. As far as how we operate and those changes, I'm going to turn it over to the Manager of Environmental Services, Mr. Cohenhoven.
Okay, baton passed to you, Mr. Cohenhoven.
Thank you, through the chair. So one of the big changes that's happening here is as mentioned, we're going from a program where we had paid contractors to do the bulk of this work to a program where we are now employing our own staff to do this work. And so a lot of what we're seeing is an increase in one type of spending in wages, and that's been used to happen through contractors. So until we know all of the specifics of how the facility is operating and the contracts and the hiring, these are estimated numbers, but effectively the bulk of this is transferring from a contractor expense to a staff wages expense.
Help, Director Elliott?
Yes, so I guess what I'm asking is, because we don't know all the final numbers, are we estimating it high? Do we expect to see the difference from that transfer maybe be a little better than what they look here, or what are the thoughts on that?
Mr. Cohenhoven?
Thank you, through the chair. We are making the best estimate that we can with the best information we have. There's no intentional contingency or cushion being added here. We're trying to be as accurate as possible. And as we move forward and get more information, we'll continue to refine this and hopefully have more of exact numbers in the draft 3 of the financial plan.
Thank you. I appreciate the answer.
You good for now? Okay, Alternate Director Scott, welcome. I'm happy to meet you. I don't know if you have any questions or things you would like to bring up.
There's one item I'd like to bring up, and that is the $20,000 requisition for the structural analysis of the community hall and the school. And I'm wondering, would there be an appropriate time to make a motion to have that money come from Community Works?
Ms. Greenan, so I guess there's two parts to the question, but and if it's appropriate time for a motion, or if that's relevant, maybe you can help.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if that
Did I freeze?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Okay. So thank you, Chair, through the chair. I'm not sure if that, I don't think that study would qualify for funding from Community Works, because Community Works is not intended for studies. We can use it for capacity building, but I'm not sure if this would qualify. I'd have to look into that. The other option would be, of course, to make a change, and the other way to do it would be we could apply for an infrastructure planning grant that we could potentially get $10,000 for the study. There's just no guarantee that's an application-based grant, so there's no guarantee that we would actually get that grant. And the other option would be to find something else in that budget to offset the cost, so reduce something else in that budget.
Director Scott, does that help you?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. Director Gisborne, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Taking a look through the budget, there is an item, and I'm already on the wrong page, in relation to the rural transit service. And I believe there's a $65,000 study, $45,000. Oh, here we go. Page 6 of 135 at the very bottom. Rural Transit Solution Fund grant, an estimated $45,000 remaining of this grant, which has been added to the 2024 budget. Funds will offset the estimated $65,000 to complete the study. Could you refresh my memory? Is that for the on-demand study that was taking place, or is that something separate? And what is the status of what's going on?
Ms. Greening, can you help clarify?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I could please direct that question to Charisse Roberts, our Special Projects Coordinator.
Ms. Roberts?
Hi, thank you, through the chair. Sorry, the question was the status of the project, was that it?
Yeah, and there's a proposal in the budget for, I think it's $20,000 from taxation, another $45,000 from the grant for the Rural Transit Solution Fund grant. So I'm wondering, like, how is that project along? Do we need to keep spending, or is that something that could be cut, or are we too far along to change course? Because my understanding was a lot of the on-demand transit study was from previous term, where the city was all gung-ho about the transit on demand. City doesn't seem super keen on it at the moment. And when I attended the public sessions, the public seemed to be more interested in, just improve the service rather than, having transit on demand in rural areas, because the service, it's not very frequent. So I'm just kind of wondering whether or not we need to continue with the study, because I think it's obvious to me, but that's just me.
Ms. Roberts?
Yeah, thank you, through the chair. So we've hired the consultant for the project and they're about 80% complete. And they anticipate bringing a report forward to the board, I believe in March. They anticipate to have the project completed by the end of February. As for the funding for the project, $50,000 came from the Rural Transit Solutions Fund. And then there was $5,000 from the QRD, as well as $5,000 from Tla'amin, for a total of 60. I think the intent was, where the 65 came from was the city would ideally have kicked in 5,000, but I believe that was voted down at the city level. So the project budget ended up being $60,000, but it can be completed within the money that's already been allocated for it.
Okay, so that clarifies. So that's just carrying on business as usual. To the previous points made by Director Elliott around solid waste management. Sorry, I missed the tail end of that. I couldn't hold myself in any longer. It is very concerning. I'm fielding a ton of questions about solid waste management. It's been one of those things that I've always been interested. It's hard to, give people a clear answer for year to year, because we're going on the solid waste management plan, which I believe was adopted in 2016 or 2017. So it's kind of hard to compare, year to year based on a plan that, is coming on 8 years old. We do 5-year financial plans, but I went back 10 years to take a look at the 2024 value of property taxation, and solid waste management for the mainland was $174,000 of taxation in that year alone. There was also the $94,000 for Lasqueti. Those two services have now been merged. So that gives us roughly $270,000 of taxation 10 years ago. And this year, we're looking at, $3.3 million. It's a big jump in taxation, way above, the 30% inflation. And I'm getting that people are asking me questions like, what is this new level of service that we're getting? Is it worth that much? And my only answer to them is, well, this is the result of a decision made years ago. We can't, when you spend the money to build a car, when you start seeing the cost of the paint, it's kind of too late to say no at this point. So here we are. And I think there does need to be some increased communication and clarification as to what the increased level of service is for our solid waste, because 10 years ago we were shipping our garbage to Washington State, and here we are 10 years later, and I believe the plan is to still ship our garbage to Washington State. So I'm frustrated. That's just me. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, you're welcome. So on to Director Lennox, your turn.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks staff for the report. A couple things, a couple points, maybe a question. Again, back to the RRC inheriting decisions that have been made in the past, and I think there is some uncertainty, especially from folks, and there, you know, the further you get out there, people from Savory are not understanding how this would be an increase in service levels, as an example. But I also am wondering, you know, along the lines that we keep seeing kind of budget increases or requisitions, you call them. This time it's $28,000 higher than anticipated. And my question is, like, how often are we going to have to come back to the well here? And, you know, I know it's based off of estimates, but that's a concern of mine. I think I know the answer, that we're going to have to figure out the final numbers. I have a specific question around one of your slides there showed the inflationary changes. And maybe you could explain to me, I see that Northside Fire Department in particular is shown as having no service level increase, but a large inflationary increase, whereas the other fire departments actually are increasing their service level with a reflective inflationary change. Does that make sense? That question?
Ms. Greenan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, what we did to try to figure out, because that's the direction that we're trying to go, is to look at what it actually costs us to maintain our current services. So what we did was we looked at the 2023 budget and then applied a 5% inflationary increase, because inflation, even though it's, you know, it's trending a bit below 5% right now, we are making budgets and we don't really know what the inflationary factors will be. And there are some, we did have to, you know, renew some contracts based on inflationary rates. Mm-hmm. So what we've done is we looked at the total budget for the Northside Volunteer Fire Department, and I can actually show a slide here that kind of gives a better picture of it. I'll just find it and then I'll share my screen. So you should be able to see my screen here, and it shows the 2023 budget for the service that had service level changes. So Northside Volunteer Fire Department is down near the bottom, and it shows that their budget, their operating budget in 2023 was $762,471. So what we did was we said, okay, if we had, if 5% of that is basically just from inflation, then that means that, so it's a $42,770 requisition change in 2024. So that means that approximately 38,000 is just to maintain their services as they were. And then there's only about 4,000 above that. So a 0.6% of their budget, 0.6% is due to a bit of an increase in their service level. We're trying to move to these budgets. We don't have, you know, our software right now. It's just Excel based, so it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint exactly what is inflationary increases, but generally we're trending about 5% inflationary.
Yeah, through the Chair, I guess what I'm seeing on the previous slide, maybe you can explain it, is Malsby and other departments have the inflationary change, but also a significant service level improvement, whereas that particular one is not. So I understand the 5%, but what's the extra for those other departments? Like, you see my question?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Through the Chair.
Yes.
Okay, through the Chair. If I could please direct that question to Ryan Toms, our Manager of Emergency Services.
Mr. Toms?
Yeah, through the Chair. I do really appreciate that question. And I just want to be clear, because I think given Director Lennox's background, maybe you're thinking service levels around the same way that I traditionally do. And there's no, overall, these fire services are not changing service levels, to be clear. You know, we tend to talk about exterior operations or interior attack fire departments. Those kinds of big service level discussions have not changed with any of our departments. And really what our financial services manager is trying to explain is just some of the more changes within the operations of the fire services. That's all that's changed. And maybe we're using two terms or the one term that means two different things here. But I just want to clarify that because I suspect that's where you're going with this. Our fire services are still, yeah.
Yeah, and that is perfect through the chair. That's exactly what I'm getting. I think when our citizens look at these, if I'm wondering, they're really wondering because service means we're going to do something. So thanks for the clarification. And I think I understand it. Just quickly, I just wanted to mention, I'd like to explore this reduction in funding from Palam, and that's a concern, especially with treaty lands within our area in a population center that we are going to get the call and they have no resources out there. So that's very interesting. And first I've heard of it. I guess the last thing is maybe you can answer. I see the city's increase is 36%, whereas the rest of us are in the high teens, maybe 20%. Is that directly related to the RRC?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. Most of that is directly related to the RRC because that's the largest increase. You know, some of it, of course, is the increase in the general administration budget because those budgets are regional.
Thanks.
Thank you, Director Lennox, and Director Dout. Floor is yours.
Okay, so first question is, there's a lot of valuable information in your slide presentation that isn't in the reports that we have in our package. And I wonder if you would mind sharing all that slide information with us, because it'll make it easier for me to make reports when I report on what we're doing here to the city of Powell River. So that'd be much appreciated because it helps. I know all the information is in the financial plan draft 2, but it's not as clearly articulated and all put into simple explanations as what your slideshow was. So I'd appreciate having those slides to talk about. And I'm going to go from what Director Lennox has said earlier. When you look at the percentages, and percentages are always scary because they have a way of misinterpreting things easily. But when you look at a 36.06% tax increase for residents of the city who are residents of the regional district, that's an incredible amount. And I look at what citizens in the Okanagan are reacting to when they react to a 30-some% wage rate tax increase, the reaction of the citizens of Vancouver to a 10% tax increase. And here we are, and I haven't got a single letter from anybody in the regional district who says this is too much and we're surprised at it. And that surprises me, frankly. But just so you know, when Councillor Elliott and I go to city council meetings, we hear a lot about it. And the members on city council who are still struggling to get through a financial plan for the next 5 years, this is a huge topic of discussion. I look forward to having detailed information to provide to people at city council and to the residents on exactly what the services are going to be in the Resource Recovery Center, how it's going to be operated, and how much each part of it is going to cost, because I think that's going to have to be something we talk about. Looking at the percentages, I see well, Area A, you know, my neighbor right here is in Area A, the percentage increase is only 17%. But the dollar impact per $100,000 is more than the city. The dollar impact per $100,000 is 22.25 for the city and 36.40 for Area A. So, and I think all of the areas here that all participate in the waste management service will all find that the biggest impact in the taxes is the waste management service. Now, I don't think that we're going to be able to reduce that. We've got all these things that are happening, and I'll just go through them. We have a project that's coming to an end. All the borrowing is being finalized, and now we have to start looking at the full repayment of the cost of borrowing for the Resource Recovery Center. We haven't had to operate the new resource recovery center yet, and we're going to be having to do that in 2024. So the price of doing that is there. So it's hitting all of a sudden this year, and those increased charges will be going forward at a relatively similar level going forward as a increase. I think in 2025, we're going to also see a significant increase because we'll be operating the resource recovery center not for part of the year, but for the entire year of 2025. And after that, I would see it leveling off, but that's where it's going to be. And we should have a way of talking about how that's going to improve our economy and improve our environmental impact and all of those things, because that's what it was supposed to do. But we are really, Director Gisborne's effort, seeing the fruition of a decision that was made back, I think, in 2016 to go ahead with this resource recovery center model. Now we're at the end of it, where we're actually putting it into function, and it's time to pay the piper. We've got to do that. But I haven't heard anywhere around the table any desire by anybody to reduce some of these costs, to reduce this requisition. You know, I made a motion to deal with the parks reserve at the last meeting and got absolutely no support. So my question is, you know, is anybody interested in finding cost savings in this budget? Or are we just ready to go ahead and try to explain to people what's happening?
It's like to say I supported
Director Gisborne, please. One speaker. Director Dout, did you have other questions or comments?
That was the question.
That was the question. Well, as to the assembly, so I guess they'll we'll have a second round and people will be able to address that when they get an opportunity. Okay, so I guess on to Director Brander.
Arnold Schwab has his hand up.
Who does?
Arnold Schwab.
Oh, Mr. Schwab, sorry. Yes.
You're muted. Classic.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be clear on a few of these things because I know concerns about operation of the Resource Recovery Center have gone up. And I think to Directors Gisborne's point earlier, you know, we used to ship stuff to Rabanco and costs have significantly changed. I would like to say that, you know, we've taken the environmental initiatives on all of these and a gold star for us, but quite honestly, a lot of these changes are the result of the province stepping in. And, you know, we can call it downloading or we can call it sort of good practices, but since MMBC days, which is now Recycle BC, they have been mandating better separation, you know, and with better separation comes reporting. So part of that reporting means we need to account for everything that sort of goes past our gates. And to possibly do all that, you know, it's going to take more manpower, it's going to take more time, and it's going to take more resources. So a lot of these changes, you know, are just going to continue to come. I mean, I look at the EPR, like the extended producer responsibilities, and in 2022 through 2026, there's probably 4 new initiatives from the province. So our costs are going up, but they're not a result of us wanting to increase the costs. They're a result of us directly responding to mandates from the province. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwab. Okay, so now I guess we're ready to move on to Director Brander.
Sure, thanks, Chair. A lot of my questions have already been asked and answered, but this is kind of just a silly one to Ms. Greenan. We typically are seeing, or it's not uncommon for us to see a 10 to 15% increase in insurance premiums. And I was just wondering, like, if I look at it from a home insurance point of view, I can shop around. Is that even possible for a QRD to do that sort of thing, or is it just a one option?
Ms. Green?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we can shop around, and we have gone to tender for insurance in the past. So yes, that is an option.
Okay, thanks. I'm just curious if it was even out there. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you, Director Render. So I have a couple comments and a couple questions. First comment is related to the expense details, and I actually prefer to see the expense details. I find it really helps me. And if these aren't included in the agenda, in the financial plan, in the agenda, I would like to request that I'm provided these details as supplemental information by default. I think it really helps me to understand how the budget works. If I can't see the expenses and I only have the revenue, I don't really have a full picture. The second comment is more for the committee, and it's a general one. We haven't had a discussion about the amount of money for our general grants and aid, and we have an item later on the agenda, so it'll come up there. But we, basically 2 years ago, we increased general grant and aid from 30,000 to 96 to contribute to safety jackets for search and rescue. And last year we left it at that level without a discussion. So given the extensive debate we've had over grants and aid, I'm fine leaving it there, but I think we should actually make the level a deliberate choice. And I think, when we get to the item on the grants and aid discussion, we can think about that and maybe make a discussion about this or any amendments well, soon. But I think 96,000 is on the generous side. I'm okay with it. I think it's fine. It's a good level, but I think should be a deliberate discussion. So two questions. On page 6, the mentions of 191,665 in general admin for software and licenses. And I went back and tried, and the report for draft 2 explains that this has gone up somewhat above that from the one from draft 1, but and I don't understand what exactly that is. So my question is, can you help me understand why that's such a high number? That seems like a lot for software annually, and why it is going up by a fairly significant amount, by over $50,000. Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to direct that question to Nancy Schmeister, our Manager of Technical Services. And I can help her if she needs details of that budget. I think she might be the best person to answer it.
Ms. Schmeister, if you're there, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just repeat the question, like specific to what line item in the budget?
So it's it was in the draft 1. It doesn't show up with the lack of details in draft 2. So in draft 1, there's a line item for administrative software and licenses, and it's in the $190,000 mark. And the draft 2, there's a comment on page 6 that says that's gone up because of extra costs, and I think around 50,000 or something. So I guess the two questions are: I just don't understand how software can be that high. So I just understand why we have that at such a level, and then what the increases, so just so I can understand why that's happening.
Through the chair. And Linda, I might ask that you might take a look at the notes for that GL, because the software that I administer are, Zoom licensing and, all of the software that we have had over the years. While we're increasing the number of users on a number of those pieces of software, just to make sure that everyone has appropriate licensing, I don't know that any of the software that I have that I'm managing would be, maybe $5,000 to $10,000 increases. But I don't know, Linda, is there something maybe with PMH or something else that might be amending that?
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Chair. Through the Chair. So we do have a number of software and licenses that we have to maintain annually. One thing that we did add to this in 2024 is purchase order software. We've put an estimate in the budget to purchase order software, just because we're finding it quite cumbersome to track all of the purchase orders. We have a lot of our purchasing is decentralized, and we are finding it quite a chore to maintain. So it takes a lot of staff time to to track all of the purchase orders and to make sure that we're getting all of our invoices in on time and that we're actually getting all of the invoices. So the purchase order software is a $40,000 cost that we've put in there as an estimate, you know, and that is something that's up for consideration. Other than that, there are a lot of software items. For example, PMH Insights, there's an annual fee of $30,000 for that. Asset Find Out is our asset management software. There is an annual fee of $10,700 for that. There's Esri licenses, all of the licenses for all of the staff that use the software. There is, we've also started, we call it HRIS My Way, which is an automated timesheet program. And there's an added cost of a $3,000 annual fee for that. For the PMH, in addition to the annual fee, which is the software that we use to report on all of our strategic initiatives on, you know, where the staff is at. There's also fees for all of the licenses. So everyone that has access to that program, we have to pay a license fee for that. There's lots of subscriptions. We have like Microsoft Visio, Microsoft Project, our Central Square, which is our accounting software. There's an annual fee for that for both the regional district and the regional hospital district. We have a huge list of software and licenses that we have to maintain. So like I said, we could put, an option is to put off the software or the purchase order software until, 2025. That would help.
And I'm not necessarily, I mean, I don't want to cause problems. I'm just surprised when I see numbers like that. I found the item in the last month's budget, and it was in the details. It shows last year was budgeted at 140,000, and this year, last month was 191,000 for 2024. But then the notes for this month say another 9, so it's going from about 140 to around 200, and that I'm not questioning it as inappropriate. I'm just pointing out that it's a surprisingly high number and I understand software companies are very good at getting money for annual subscriptions these days. So because that's the way it works. So I'll leave it there. I don't want to take more time, but I'll go on to my second question, which has an action item. And it's related to page 108 and the LIVFD, the Muscogee Island Fire Department. I know the actual amounts for 2023 are likely to change a bit, but the actual expenses for 2023 do seem to be significantly less than the 2023 budget. So there looks like there will be a fair surplus, and without so sorry, that's right. So the report notes, so there's different reasons for that. We went over that a lot last time. So the amount goes up quite a bit. And the report, the draft 2 notes, add another 6,000 for health and safety training, which is fine. But the surplus, as it gets refined, I think a lot of this surplus seems to be due to less spending than budgeted on variable expenses such as honorariums. So the honorariums were less spending. There was less for some travel, conferences, and so on. Given the dramatic tax increase projected for the service, because it's a lot higher, and we know that from last discussions, I would actually prefer that most of this surplus be applied to reduce tax acquisition, with some of it going to reserve. So I know the default often is to move surpluses into reserve, and that's generally has some good rationale behind it. But I think given the size of the tax increase, I would like to suggest that we should do that. And I'm going to put forward a motion to that effect, and I just sent it to the boardroom. And I'm not sure, corporate officer, are you on the delegate one or on the boardroom one?
Thank you, Chair. I'm the delegate.
Second.
Okay. So the motion is about to be sent there, and I'll read it while it's coming up. So that the committee recommend the board request staff to apply the majority of the 2023 surplus in the LIVFD budget as revenue in the 2024 budget to mitigate tax requisition increases. And if I get a seconder, which I have, I'll just give a very brief rationale for it. Part of it, I use the word majority rather than a specific amount because I understand there's trade-offs, and I want to give staff leeway to think about this and apply an appropriate mix. But I think at least half, and ideally, in my mind, most, because the tax increase is high. And when, we talked about percentage increases. Director Dowd presented, the city's got the highest percentage increase, but Lasqueti Island has the highest tax rate increase, the net, bottom line of the amount per 100,000. So the average, or every other area in the regional district, is going to go up right now 21 to 34 per 100,000, and Lasqueti Island is at 55 per 100,000. So it's significantly higher tax increase in terms of dollars than any other area. So this would help bring that down. And of course, one of the largest parts of that for Lasqueti is our fire department, which is well over half of our share of taxes. So this is just to help ease that tax pain a little bit and make sure that the tech requisition isn't as giant as it might otherwise be. But I'll leave it there and see if there's any other discussion on this motion. While corporate officer gets the words properly. So is there any other discussion on this? I don't see Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I'll dip my toes in the water because Area B also has a volunteer fire department that is not LIVFD, so this motion doesn't affect the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department. Myself, I'm supportive of a lot of the surplus going into reserves to kind of get ready for the future of, fire department equipment, replacement. So when it comes to the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, I'm not as supportive of such a motion, but for the LIVFD, I've heard the compelling arguments from the director of Area E in Lasqueti, and I actually will support this motion. But I'm also going to give it some thought as to how it relates to the fire department that serves Area B. So thank you for the comments in this motion, Chair.
Okay, and is there any other? I can't see the boardroom very well, so is there any other hands? Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. My question is more about a general process. I noticed they were saying when they considered the surpluses for the grants and aid that it may reduce the amount that they're going to be needing to increase the requisition by to zero. So that led me to believe that as a matter of general process, you would take surpluses in a particular area and apply them to that area, and we wouldn't know what those are until draft 3. I'm just wondering if this motion is a little bit redundant.
Ms. Greenan, is this motion redundant or does it help?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, through the chair. So in the Lasqueti Volunteer Fire Department, we are planning to use $32,000 of the reserve, but as Director Fall pointed out, it looks like of the prior year surplus, and it looks like we're trending right now. It's $81,000 surplus based on the information that I had when I published this agenda. Of course, we do still have a lot of year-end invoices coming in, so we might not actually know what that actual surplus is for year-end. So I agree with the way that Director Fall has proposed the motion, that if we apply most of it, at least then we can make a good estimate, and then it, that helps to allow for some changes in the actual surplus, and then. I think the other part of the question was, I don't think we won't actually know the actual surpluses when I publish draft 3 of the budget, because it will be published in time for the February 7th meeting, and we're still trying to get invoices in for our year end. So I might not know the actual surpluses at that point. And so I think there was another part to Director Elliott's question. I might have to ask you to repeat it.
I think you answered the question. I wondered if maybe what Director Fall was asking for was something that you would consider as a matter of course anyhow, but it sounds to me like you would normally put those into a reserve. But is there a standard amount that you require for reserves as well each year, and maybe shifting money to one would require an extra amount in the budget for the other? I don't really know the answers to those questions.
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair. So what we do as a matter of course is we try to put all of the operating reserves to like all of the surpluses to the individual departments' reserves each year. So the trade-off, for example, with the Muskegon Island Volunteer Fire Department is that if we put more of that to the towards the 2024 operating budget, then that's less money that's going into increase their reserves. There are some services like general administration and waste management where, you know, we have quite a few moving parts and the surpluses are generally quite large. And so we do plan every year to use a large portion of the prior year surplus. But for most services, we're trying to budget accurately so that we don't have large surpluses and so that we can keep the surpluses flowing into the reserve to bolster their reserves. So it's not a trade-off with other services. It's all within the, like for Laskedia, it would all be within the Laskedia Island Volunteer Fire Department service. So like you say, the trade-off is just that you'd have a lower requisition in 2024, but your reserves won't be bolstered as much.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Okay, then I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, so that's it for me. Now I'll go into round two and I'll just let directors put their hand up because maybe everyone's asked their questions, but Director Elliott and Director Gisborne are up for round two.
Thank you for this opportunity, Chair. I really appreciate it. So I have two points. One is a question and one is an ask, I guess. Given my first question around the resource waste or the waste management plan and the huge ticket that we have in implementing it this year, do we have a communications plan for big ticket items such as this? And if we don't, I think we need one. This particular, I'll sum up what I understand and what I think the public doesn't understand or what needs to have a better understanding of. We have a waste management plan, or a solid waste management plan, that was enacted as a result of legislation from the province, which increased our responsibilities in that area. The plan talks about how we meet our obligations under the legislation, and we've been implementing that plan ever since we put it in place since 2016. So what does the overall plan look like? Where are we at within the implementation? And how does and where all these numbers are kind of attached to, and when we see that leveling off. I don't think people understand why we're doing things differently for what is perceived to be the same service that they've already gotten. And I think it's incumbent upon us to explain that and make all the linkages between the various plans and the whys and the legislations and help people understand that, because I don't think there's widespread understanding in our community, and that's an education piece I think super important for our budget year this year. So do we have a communications plan that's linked to rolling out of our budget so people can help learn about that? And then my second question has to do with our internal operations and how we do efficiency reviews. Do we do regular efficiency reviews? If so, and when I mean efficiency reviews, I guess I want to know if new technology might be used to better implement the way we operate and how we review that, and whether we look at that as a matter of our general operating, or whether there is something that is needed to make it a part of how we regularly do our operations, or what the recommendations around that would be. So those are my two questions.
I think the first one I'll hand to Mr. Schwab, because I think that's a communications for the RRC and maybe Mr. Cohen-Hogan, but I'll give it to Mr. Schwab first.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very good point on the communications plan. So every year we do actually have a reporting process for the solid waste management plan. So we are required to report all of the things that we're doing and our progress in there. And that's, I think it's typically due out in the spring. So you will see that, but there are good points that were raised to say, like in our next solid waste report, perhaps we start to touch on those things of how this is going to affect residents, what kind of services are going to change, and what the expectation could be. There is a sort of communications plan in the works. It looks a little different this year than it would have in past years, because really this is the big year where the RRC opens, and we're still putting pieces together. We are in early stages, but I will take all of those questions into consideration.
Thank you. And I think the second question is for Ms. Green, and or at least we'll start there on efficiency.
Thank you, Chair. As far as efficiency reviews, you know, I haven't been involved in undertaking them as an organization as a whole, but I know that each department looks at their processes. For example, we looked at in the financial services department, we looked at our process for processing timesheets and found that we could do them more efficiently by implementing, you know, electronic software, timesheet software. And so we took the step to implement that over 2023 and 2024. So that the plan is that will help to improve our efficiency. And we do regularly, like, for example, we are looking now at purchase order software, because we're finding that with the decentralized purchasing, and it is becoming quite cumbersome and labor intensive. So the purchase order software should help to alleviate some of that, of the staff pressure. As far as other efficiencies, I think I would have to hand that over to the Chief Administrative Officer, Al Radke.
Mr. Radke?
Thank you, Chair. I think regional districts are fortunate in that any of the services we provide have been approved by the public. So our service is based on what the public wants and desires. So we stick within those realms. I'm confident that all of the staff are looking at ways to improve and make life easier, not only for themselves, but for the public that are enjoying some of these benefits. As Linda Green has pointed out, they've reviewed their payroll system, and instead of doing it manually, timesheets and all that stuff, they're going to attempt to automate it. You've heard that they've looked at purchasing orders to do the same. I'll go back in history and let you know that the software that we use for reporting out the strategic plan is a vast and great improvement over the spreadsheets and Excels that we used to laboriously go over to present to you what would take hours, which now takes minutes, because the software just gathers, collects it, and collates it in minutes. So do we have an actual process, a timed process? No, but I do believe each department manager is taking it upon themselves to find those ways to make operations easier and smoother.
Okay, so and part of my question was whether there was recommendations around that, and what I hear you saying is that you're not recommending any changes to help make that process any better.
Through the chair, our management team meets weekly, and we discuss various things. And you know, I know that things have been bantered around in the past, such as automated campground reservations. So these things are brought up, and I don't think a recommendation is required at this time to formalize any of that, because a lot of it is just fluid and natural as it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some comments and thoughts on the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, but I'd just like to jump in on the Resource Recovery Center real quick. just to clarify my understanding of some of the history. Yes, there are requirements that the provincial government has put on regional districts. My understanding is they first put on regional districts back in the 90s. Before that, it was up to municipalities and regional districts to deal with solid waste as they saw fit. Of the day, there was a debate and controversy around who was going to clean up the old incinerator site. I do believe I still have a letter in my possession from the Ministry of Environment of the day that said whoever contaminated the site is responsible for cleaning it up. It is municipal property, and it was a municipal responsibility to clean up. As part of our solid waste management plan, the regional district decided to build the Resource Recovery Center, utilizing grant funds to help clean up the municipality site and take that liability off of their plate. So that's where, you know, every now and then I would like a little thank you card from the municipality for cleaning up their liability. And I'd also like to remind the municipality that there is still a contaminated site at the end of the airport, right next to Myrtle Creek, which is a water source for many of the farms in electoral area B. So yes, there are some things that we are required to do by the province, but the regional district was not required to clean up the municipality's old dump. Now on to Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department. With the discussion that occurred, I had a flash of memory from actually 2019, where we had a discussion around MVFD, and at the day, and I went back and checked, I had pushed for a 25% increase in the tax requisition for the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, after which I wanted to see a rate of inflation kind of hold steady. And the idea with that was to encourage the fire department to, you know, there's that old saying of like, well, if you don't spend it this year, you won't get it next year. And the idea was to keep putting money into the reserves. Well, this year we're seeing a 12% increase in the Malaspina Volunteer Fire Department, which equates to roughly $109,000 in tax requisition. And then checking page 106 of 135, taking a look at all the transfers from operating, which I think is prior year surplus going into this year's surplus, or this year's reserve, works out to roughly, I think, $150,000 of last year's surplus going into the reserves. So I'm wondering if it would actually be in line with my previous position of advocacy from 5 years ago, of having the tax increase go from 12% down to 5%, and having those reserve contributions actually decrease. So I'm wondering, is that something that requires a motion? And what's the thoughts of the Assembly?
Well, first of all, I'll hand it over to Ms. Greenan. And I think if there's, if it does require a motion, I think the thoughts might be best obtained by putting forth the motions. Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would. That would require a motion. Then we'll have a specific direction to make that change in draft 3 of the budget. But I did want to, as this is discussion of a fire department, I would like to direct the question also to Ryan Toms, our Manager of Emergency Services, as he might have something to add.
Mr. Toms?
Yeah, if I could, through the chair, 2 thoughts. One, and I was wanting to get the chair's attention just in the previous discussion, just want you just to be careful in looking right now with the fire services year end not closed. Ms. Greenan did mention that. Certainly 4th quarter honorariums are still not signed off and out. So before you start counting surpluses, but you're not far off. There is surplus. I can see that too. It just won't be exactly that. On to Director Gisborne's question. I think as staff, we would appreciate clarity. The kind of clarity you're talking about is fine. It would give us numbers to work with. And again, just couch that with, just be careful that you're looking at this draft surplus that really doesn't show the full year end. But in terms of, if I understood Director Gisborne's proposal, that would give concrete direction from this board, and as staff, we would work with that.
Thank you, Director Gisborne.
Then I'll put forward a motion that the Malaspina, or the committee, direct the board, I'm sure the corporate officer can help me.
Recommend to the board.
Rec staff to adjust the requisition amount from 12% to 5% for draft 3 of the financial plan. And if I see a smile, I think that makes sense.
That
okay, good.
Got the wording for that, corporate officer. Okay, is there okay? Is there a seconder for that motion? I'll second that for Director Elliott. Just seconded. Okay, fine. Is there any discussion on the motion, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, there's always going to be a variety of costs with volunteer fire departments that are unforeseen. Some years you get lots of calls, some years you don't get a lot of calls. There's also a number of things that occur within the department that the board is not aware of because they're very much operational. One of the purposes of my advocacy 5 years ago was to give a big increase of 25% and then in the future have a rate of inflation increase, which we have actually gone above rate of inflation for a number of years. And the idea there was to kind of give a bit more stability to the future planning of the fire department and to the taxpayers at the same time. This year, we have a big increase in our solid waste management budget, electoral area B and C, which participates in these services. We don't have a huge tax base, especially area B, when you actually do the cost comparison of property value per person. Area B is actually one of the lowest in the entire region. And we have the surplus if we go to, I think, 5%. It's essentially going from 110,000 down to about a $50,000 increase. I'm sure our staff can come back with that. So we will still have money going into the reserves. It just won't be as much. And then we'll have that information coming back at the 3rd financial plan draft, which will be coming back in February. Which, you know, we can adjust then as well if we desire. And then going forward to next year's budget, we can also then, you know, reassess and increase that requisition if needed or decrease if needed. And it is a bit of a challenge about fire departments, because I remember many years ago, it was actually practice for the directors of area B and C to meet with the fire chief to discuss what their needs and issues are. That hasn't happened since I've been on the board. So that means it's, I don't have as much information to work with. But based on the finances in front of us and hearing the concerns of the tax increases in the area, I think going from 12% increase to the rate of inflation, which is 5%, is a bit more palatable for constituents.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Director Dowd.
Thank you. Fortunately, I've got the big orange card I can wave.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I know I've watched the meetings online and I know how difficult it is to recognize individuals, but you know, I appreciate where Director Gisborne is going, but I would prefer a more general resolution. And whether this one is passed or not, I'd be making a more general resolution to have staff look at savings wherever they can in the 2024 financial plan draft 2 and come back with a report on reductions of spending that could fairly reduce the impact of taxation on all of the residents of the regional district. And I think, frankly, we'd be remiss if we didn't spend some time looking at all ways which we could possibly do tax reductions. If we're the most efficient and most well-run regional district in the world and we're doing everything perfectly, that's a nice thing, but I would like us to at least to examine that. So, you know, I'm not necessarily opposed to this resolution, but I'll be making a more broad strokes resolution, because I think if we try to go through this and do every line of every service, we're going to be here for a very long time.
I look forward to seconding your motion.
Yes, indeed. So are there any other, okay, we're on this one, the Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Chair. Thanks to Director Doubt. I really appreciate Director Gisborne's intent, but I totally follow the line of reasoning for Director Doubt, because as I look at the budget, I keep thinking, oh, what about this? What about that? It's not just the fire department. I'm looking at North Side now. But I think that's the right approach. And that's what our constituents would ask, is like, please seize everything. If it's $10 or $100,000, it's still worth the effort. So.
We'll try to Director Gisborne, and then I want to try to get to a vote.
I think we can actually pass both motions. This one will at least just help us get one off the table, and then I look forward to seconding Director Doubt's motion.
Yeah, well, let's focus on this one. CAO.
Thank you, Chair. Staff appreciate any and all direction that you can give us, and you are the ones that make the final decisions. I'm just going to caution you on how much you want to remove from surpluses that are intended to go to reserves, because those reserves are what we build up to make those large capital purchases down the road. And ironically, one of the last fire truck borrowings that we had to go through, we got a little bit raked over the coals by the folks in area B and C, because we did not have enough built up in reserves and basically had the whole shot. So just a caution, but you are the decision makers and we appreciate the direction.
Thank you, CAO. And I'd just like to add a brief comment. I appreciate the comments made by our manager of emergency services. And I hope and expect that if you know, this motion, and if it passes, and the one on LIVFD, if those cause some challenges in the budget, that they'll be brought forward and the board can review and revise. So saying that, I will then call the question on this motion on the table. So all those in favor of this motion? Opposed? None opposed. That carries. Okay, Director Doubt, I believe you had a motion to put forward.
This one written out, so for the patience of the corporate officer, if she gets her typing fingers ready.
Okay.
Second.
So it's already been seconded.
Is the board request, the committee request staff to examine the 2024 to 2028 financial plan draft 2 with a look, or with an attempt to find any possible cost savings that can reduce the overall taxation in a fair manner.
Second.
Okay, thank you for that. And while we're waiting, I think there's enough to have discussion on that. We've had a fair amount of discussion already, but Director Elliott.
Oh, thank you, Chair. So I was just thinking about startup costs for the Resource Recovery Center, and the need to have a large requisition at this time in order to kickstart that. My question is, are there startup costs that we need to cover this year that might create like in the wouldn't be annual type costs? And would that lend our increase this year to having bigger reserves next year or bigger surpluses in the future? Or is there any startup costs that we're covering that we don't like, that I don't understand?
Yeah, Mr. Schwab, I guess it goes to you.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yeah, there are definitely going to be startup costs. You know, one of those obviously will be training. These are going to be all new systems, new facilities. We are going to have to spend some time, probably bring in some experts or people from other regional districts to assist us with a smooth transition to opening. There are probably going to be some unanticipated equipment costs, but overall, we're not looking, we don't believe in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for extra startup costs. We aren't anticipating hopefully much more than somewhere in the $50,000 to $100,000 range. But it's going to be brand new for us. So what I am relaying to you here, there might be still a surprise or two in store for us.
So As follow-up, do we have reserves for that operating area that are fairly healthy right now? That's my question.
Mr. Schwab?
Through the chair, it is a good question. It's a discussion we'd have to have here. You know, it's because it's a brand new facility, any reserves would have to be in the solid waste budget. But at this point, you know, and maybe somebody can correct me here, but I wouldn't have anticipated we had any sort of reserve set aside for the RRC yet.
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair, I just wanted to let you know that our reserves, once we use them as planned for the capital, we'll have $49,000 in reserves for that service. So they're pretty much depleted in 2024.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we got the motion before us. I just want to review that. Does that get to the intent put forward by the mover and seconder, especially?
I think it does.
Okay, so I think we all got that. Okay, Director Gisborne, hopefully we can move on. We're just to point out, we're at 2 o'clock and we've hour and a half in. We're on the first item still. So Director Gisborne.
Well, the first item is our financial plan and our budget, which is kind of probably one of the most important things that we do. I'm absolutely in support of this motion, but keep in mind that this motion is putting a lot of the onus on staff to come back with cost savings. And I'd like to remind everyone around this table that there is also a great deal of responsibility on the board for what the board asks staff to do. Every time we ask staff for a report or a zoning bylaw or studies, even if we're getting a consultant to do it, it still requires our staff time to work with the consultants and to come back with that information, and that all has costs. So when we are looking at our financial plan and we're looking at our services, we, the board, need to also think about what are we asking our staff to do, and whether or not that we've asked them to do something that, you know, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because we might ask the board to do something this year, and then the cost for it shows up 3 years down the line. That's the issue that we have with the Resource Recovery Center and a number of other initiatives. Is it is the previous board or the board before the previous board that made a decision that we're now having to pay for today. And we, going forward, need to take into account our responsibility for what motions we're passing and asking staff to do that are going to have those costs going down the line. Because as I understand it, the Resource Recovery Center, we're starting to pay back the loan. That's a 30-year loan. That's a number of boards that are going to be still dealing with that cost. And that's a decision that was made terms ago and will affect many terms in the future. So I'm in support of this motion, but I want the board to think about our responsibility on what projects and initiatives we're approving and pushing forward going forward, and what the long-term costs are of those initiatives. So
okay, is there any further discussion on this motion? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. Now, unless there's something else the board wants to put forward, we have in our agenda the recommended motion, which is to accept as draft 2 for guiding the financial plan for guiding. Does Director Doubt moving that as seconder?
Like that motion.
Okay, Director Lennox. So this is the motion in the agenda. Is there any discussion on that motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. That's good. I think I will call for a 5-minute break. Is that what Director Gisborne was going to ask?
yeah, I was going to ask about a 5-minute break, but also if we could potentially adjust our agenda, because I believe we have a member of the public, or
Very patient member.
a very patient member of the public that is to speak to, I believe, 9.4.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so after the recess, could we deal with 9.4 so that way, who knows how many more hours it's going to take for us to get through the other 2 items, so.
Okay.
It'll lift you up.
Oh, it's good news too.
Okay, so we'll come back in a couple of minutes. Less than 5.
We usually do that.
Chair. Thank you.
Fair. Are we back in open session? Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, yes, we can start. Director Brander's there. Okay, we might as well go. So we're going to address the item 8, but it's I got the wrong agenda open. It's 9.4 in our agenda. We'll deal with that right now if that's acceptable by unanimous consent. And we have Ms. O'Neill, Kathleen O'Neill, presenting to us, and I will first hand it over to Ms. O'Neill, and then we'll there'll be an opportunity to ask questions, and then we can look at the recommendation in the agenda.
Okay,
Thank you, Ms.
I
O'Neill.
wasn't told I only had 10 minutes, so this will be one of the more high-speed presentations.
We appreciate it.
So this is about the online accommodation platform funding for housing, which has been traditionally small, but in 2023, because of delays, 2 years came 176,000. Here's the, it's not moving.
One second. Let's see if I can.
Only 60 slides.
Yeah, don't worry. So this is from the Regional Housing Needs Report 2021. Still not moving.
There we go.
So we're experiencing a housing crisis, which is something of an understatement. Oops, went too fast. Average home price increased by 68% in 4 years in the past. Completely outpaced the rise in wages, and local rental rates are no longer affordable for many residents, many working residents. Local housing security and inadequately housed people and unhoused people is on the rise. Our perspective on housing at our agency, it's a human right, and affordable housing is a part of essential community infrastructure. Affordable housing attracts and retains local workers, supports workers employed at diverse wage levels, ensures that workers live in the communities where they're employed. We also believe that affordable housing directly contributes to the economic profile of a community and the quality of life of the people in that community. And as this project will prove, creating affordable housing helps to leverage new resources for a community, attracting additional funding, which we did with this project, generating jobs and supporting businesses. And I'll be taking this presentation to the Chamber of Commerce because I think employers are really struggling across all sectors to find housing for their workers. Okay, attracting new employers, business. I just really want to reframe our thinking around affordable housing, that it really is for the general public that we need it at this time. And this downstream effect of attracting new business and new workers supports the community's ability to provide key services, education, healthcare, transportation infrastructure, parks and recreation, and so on. So I really want it embedded in your minds in this way. Also, affordable housing supports the social success and the economic health of people in the community, and it builds long-term commitment to the community and promotes community growth. Okay, income and cost of living and blah, blah, these are all taken from these sites, which I can give to you later, but basically average annual salary per person, just over 45,000, 17% lower than the Canadian average. This leaves an after-tax monthly income of just over 3,000 for a single person. The average cost of living for a single person in qathet is almost 3,400. Am I going fast enough for you?
That's good. We're keeping up.
Okay. This leaves, I've gone the wrong way, sorry. Getting all caught up. Okay, so then we came up with something called Nest Co-Living. We actually branded this concept for this project. What is co-living? It's a form of housing in which tenants rent a combination of personal and communal space from a landlord, in this case from Cress. That gives them the same tenancy rights as anybody in an apartment if it's done this way. So they have housing security. Benefits are community, that's worldwide. I can give you all the background on this at another point, but community within the household, connecting single people, improves again their quality of life. Convenience, co-living bundles all the costs of housing into one payment. There's no startup or cost for people. Get cost saving, which is enormous because you're doing it this way, and a comfortable, attractive living space. So we used, I'm giving you this background so you know what I want to do next year. I want to do exactly the same thing again. So we used this money. It took a while to as the down payment on a house at 3832 Corridor. It's 4-bedroom house, purchased at $625, renovated, become the first nonprofit worker co-living space in the original district, and I think on this part of the coast altogether. Launched November 1st, and it's fully tenanted. Timelines just show you how quickly we did this. So December, we sent our plan to Sunshine Coast Tourism. It's okay. Sorry, they sent it on to Destination BC. February, it's approved. March, I started reaching out because we were given this project because for the last 10 years I've run a federally funded program here called Reaching Home, which is subsidies to workers and to other people, seniors in the community who are struggling to, say, pay rent or meet basic needs. So we told them about this. They thought it was a fabulous idea, and I knew I wanted to get more money from them because this wasn't quite enough to do the job. I got the money in May. In June, I toured 20 properties. In July, we met a bid on the house. I had to go through a whole bunch of other process. My board agreed to take on the risk, blah, 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 but I'm just showing you. So May, we actually got the money. August, September, October, I leveraged more funding, almost close to the same amount, 160,000 from Reaching Home. So this project combined federal, provincial, and regional district funding in one project to make this happen, and everybody is really excited about it. And we started recruiting tenants. The first tenants moved in November 1st, actually a little bit before, but we didn't start some. Fully occupied by December 31st. So you just see how quickly 4 housing spaces were created. So we had that, sorry, my line didn't work. We leveraged Reaching Home funding basically in less than 6 months. 6 months, 4 fully equipped, high quality. So we furnished the house, we renovated the house. Everything was there for people when they moved in. And that helped to equalize the dynamics of the house too, that everything was set up in the game. There's the house. That's the ground floor. We renovated to create a mudroom, bedroom, bathroom on the, so we had 2 bedrooms. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2 sitting rooms and a kitchen. That's the ground floor. That's the upstairs. That's the backyard. That's like the living room that we furnished. Because I think affordable housing should be beautiful and affordable. Yeah. Boom.
Well done.
Thank you very much for the really nice nice work you're doing. So I'll pass this over to the board for comments. Director Lennox.
Yes. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I know you were trying to go quick. When I looked through it, I had a couple of questions. You sort of talked about how do people qualify to get a space?
Okay, so we basically advertise and we have an application process, but the really difficult thing to do is to match the people in the house. Because if you don't do that properly, the whole thing will fall apart. We also, because it was a new project, no one had ever seen it. When I posted on Facebook, totally negative response from, oh, this will be another ghetto, or, you know. So we focused on workers who were essential to our community, like education, nursing, service sector, all that stuff. So we And then we just tried to match the people who came in. So right now, living in the house are one person who works in disability services, 2 who work in education, and 1 who works in the nonprofit sector. So we wanted to create a really good vibe around this type of housing. This is not supported housing. These people have no complex issues. They're just workers who are, you know, living in their car or in hotel, you know, like they just can't find housing that they can afford.
And just one quick follow-up, I noticed in your successful efforts, which you brought together quickly, 4 co-living spaces, they were about 84,000 when you break it down each. I noticed your new plan for this coming year probably is adding 3 more spaces, it looks like, and a cost of 65,000 each. How are you realizing the savings, I guess?
Again, now we've got our project partners on board, and we didn't when we did this, so I had to kind of convince them, but now they're really happy to be part of this project. This is the Reaching Home funders. You know, it's all, you don't quite know what the market's going to do between when I pitch this and they tell us, you know, and we start going out to look at what the market has to offer. So again, I'm looking at creating as many spaces as I can at the lowest cost I can for the money I have in the smallest possible window. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Director Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. So you had per unit costs, and that also included your renovations, correct? Did you put the renovation budget into the mortgage sort of deal?
No, the mortgage, like the 176,000, by the time we'd gone through the process of the paying the mortgage and it was almost at 190,000, right? So, but my board knew that going in, but they're so committed. They said, okay, we believe in you. I knew the funders our other funders were, that all of that money came from them. So we also got a subsidy because, which they're willing to roll over into subsequent years so that I could keep the rent at $750, because if I'm charging 1,000, it starts to look less attractive. I'll probably be looking,
The subsidy you're referring to is a per unit subsidy for the renters.
Yeah.
And so my question is you don't require more funding from us to sustain that unit that's built into the revenue that
that's done. That was all built out. That's done. Now, the next one, it will
create a whole new unit.
Yeah.
How does that per unit cost compare to other affordable housing project per unit costs? You don't know? Okay.
No,
okay.
It's so far below.
Okay, that's my question.
Like it's probably at least a third, if that, like to create a unit. I building costs,
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. Wait for me to.
The chair.
There you go. Yeah.
Through the chair.
I still have to chair this, so.
My apologies, Chair Fall. Seeing your timeline, and maybe I've been involved in government for too long, but how did you do it so quick?
I was poised to leap out, like I was saying, is the money coming in? Is the money in? Is the money in yet? And then, you know, kind of had the board primed. So really, the longer part was like, okay, we're going to secure the mortgage. So I didn't look at houses till I had secured a mortgage. I knew what my upper limit was. I took the builders with me to kind of assess what's going on here. What do we need to do? I'm the worst viewer of property. I walk in and go, no, I don't even, you're not going to show me anything. I can tell the layout won't work and I leave. So, I had done quite a bit of study. I had lined up, I had builders committed to doing the renovations. So I knew I could do it. Also, our federal funders agreed to cover the mortgage over the renovation period. So I knew that wouldn't be a loss. I had a lot to figure out, but I had it figured out when the money came in.
So now you've got some practice and you're looking.
Yeah, now I think this should be a movement. I want to take this out.
You're looking to do the sequel.
Yeah, and I think it's unusual. What really helped with that is that it's worker co-living. So you've already got some commonality in the people. I definitely focus on people with no additional issues other than housing, because I felt this would the image to the public, which is why we branded it Nest. Because whoever, somebody sees this and thinks, hey, I could do that, or does it differently. I think affordable housing has to be attractive and beautiful, you know, for people, and that will generate the right kind of response and dynamic. And the people now are really happy. They're loving it and they're forming relationships. So that's funny. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll just note the red on the wall. So we're at the end of question period. If that Director Doubt has a question. So if there's anyone else who has a burning question, we can extend it a bit, but just try to be brief so we can get on to the motion. Director Doubt.
I'm listening to your report and looking at our staff report. Sure. Not exactly the same thing. And the staff report talks about recommending accessing the 2024 annual affordable housing MRDT. Is that 2024 funding necessary to continue your plan?
Yeah, the 150 will be the down payment on the next property. Okay. Using the same.
That was my question. So it's an exciting program, and as you noted, the amount of money that's in the affordable housing fund from the Sunshine Coast Regional District has increased quite a bit. So I imagine there will be more competitors wanting to share in that money as time goes along. So, you know, thanks for coming and sharing your program here. You talked about going to the Chamber of Commerce, talking to the city of Powell River, maybe coming to a council meeting to present that.
Sure.
Would be a good idea, because I'm not sure that everybody on council or everybody in the city really understands where this funding comes from and where it goes. Okay. And that could probably be very useful. But, sounds like a great project. And you know, we had a housing study earlier, and one of the things in the original housing study was the identification of how many bedrooms there were in the city.
That was another thing that prompted me to think this way.
This, I think, the kind of thing that goes along with providing housing in those bedrooms that are currently vacant and dealing with affordable housing and things like that. Pretty exciting.
Thank you. Okay, we're good.
Well, thank you, Ms. O'Neill. That was very, very helpful, and the work's really good. And we'll consider, hopefully someone would like to move the recommendation. So Director Gisborne, Director Lennox, and is there any further discussions? This is to recommend that the board, that the QRD authorize press to submit the Nest co-living housing initiative to the Sunshine Coast Tourism to access the 2023 MRDT funds. So is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? None opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is item 9.2, which is our financial assistance policy options.
I'll move the first.
Okay, so the first one, Director Lennox. So discussion on the first one, which is to move all the grant and aid funding through general grants and aid and local area ADE grants and aid, and that the amounts be adjusted for this. So any discussion, Director Doubt?
No.
He saw you.
Director Doubt has the floor.
So I've read this a few times, and I'm trying to understand exactly what it means. I think it means what the chair just said it means. We have a general grant and aid service, an economic development grant service, and a social development grant service. And I think the recommendation is that all of these granting functions be moved into the general grants and aid. And the specific difference between those is that the general grants and aid are funded by the city and the electoral areas generally, and the other two are not. And I'd just like an actual detailed explanation of what money goes into what pot right now, because there is no financial disclosure in this motion that I could see. I'd like to hear from staff about what they think this actually means in terms of who pays for what and how the process goes about.
Ms. Green, and I think that's for you.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. Yes, so currently we provide total grants of, in 2022, we provided total grants of $355,226 from the various pots. And the one sheet to look at, or the table to look at for that, would be on the 10-year funding summary on page 5 of the report. And that shows where all of the funding came from. So what this change would mean, for example, would be if we move the funding from economic development now in, for example, economic development we'll start with. If we remove the funding, which was in 2022 was $23,613 was spent from economic development. And where that funding came from was from areas A, B, C, and D. Was actually from A, C, and D, and then area B contributed to the grants and aid. So we took that funding, and now instead of having it in economic development, we would divide it up and put that funding into electoral area A, C, and D, based on what was spent in the past. And we would allocate it from economic development into A, C, and D based on the assessed values. So it would be prorated based on the assessed values. And then for social planning is currently funded from electorals areas A through E. And so what we would do then is we would take the social planning funds. And I think the idea in this case was to, instead of budgeting, for example, $147,389 in the social planning service, the idea then would be to put that towards the general grants and aid service, because social planning initiatives are thought to, the idea is that they benefit the whole region. So that was the idea, was to move those funds to general grants and aid for the budget. And then that would be it. We would just move the social planning budget of, like I said, approximately $147,000 into general grants and aid, and all of the rest we would just move the economic development funds into the various service grants.
And Director Dout?
Yeah, so the explanation is a little complex for me. So you're suggesting that we move the economic development funding into general grants and aid. I thought that's what I heard you say.
Not quite.
That's not what you were saying. That would make it more clear.
Ms. Greenan?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Sorry, what I meant to say was that the economic development funding is currently, that pot is contributed from areas A, C, and D. So what we would do then is take the respective amounts and move those to area A grants and aid budget, area C grants and aid budget, and area D grants and aid budget. It's the social planning funds that would move. We would budget then under general grants and aid, and then eliminate contributions from the social planning service.
I think we're getting close to the answer. So I think that would mean an increase in the requisition for general grants and aid to cover that social development or social planning, where it would normally be in a different spot, which would, my interest there is that's increasing the contribution of the city to the social development. Am I wrong?
Ms. Greenan?
No, that is correct. That would be an increase to the general grants and aid. And the other option is then to reduce the budget. So you could, the directors could also consider, having a reducing, like right now we budget about $96,000 for general grants and aid. That's at the board's option if they want to add like another $147,000 to the general grants and aid, or if you want to add a different amount, perhaps you want to add $100,000 instead of $147,000. Those are the options that are on the table. It's at the board's direction.
That help, Director Dout? Okay, so Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I know our financial decisions and grant and aid discussions in the past have gone around in circles, and sometimes the understanding becomes clear as mud. I actually support this recommendation, and I'm going to explain why. The first challenge we run into when discussing grants and aid is the Economic Development Service. And that's kind of like, let me back up a second. We have 8 pots of money that we can hand out grants from. 5 electoral areas each. So area A has its own, area B has its own. And then you've got general grant and aid, which everyone pays into. And then we've got number 7, which is economic development. And that's areas A, area C, and area D. And that's kind of an interesting service because every time we hand money out from economic development, area B, which is not part of the service, says, hey, we can contribute from area B out of our electoral area grant and aid. We can put money in to whatever amount is going out to whatever organization. The first part of this motion in relation to economic development is saying, okay, rather than using the economic development and area B chipping in a little bit every time, why don't we just have areas A, B, C, and D chip in to the same initiative, rather than having to go economic development and area B chipping in as well. It switches the perspective of our grants and aids, rather from, okay, is it economic development or is it social, to being more of, well, who pays and who benefits? Because when you look at grants and aid, that's really the crux of the matter. Because there are issues that come up that appear to be economic development in nature, but provide no benefit to Texada Island, but yet they're stuck paying into that initiative. This motion doesn't say we're going to give out all this money and have it switched over. This motion is saying, okay, we're going to restrict grant and aid to only go through the 6 pools rather than the 8 pools. The recommendation from Steph on the second item, which is social planning, which is essentially all the electoral areas, but not the municipality, has also run into some challenges, because there's instances where an organization asks for money from the regional district. We don't have enough money from general grant and aid, so we give them money from social planning, and it's to LIFT or the CRC or something that's inside the municipality, and they're not getting funding from the municipality, but they're only getting funding from the electoral areas. And that's kind of an issue. The good news is, if we do get a grant that comes to general grant and aid, please correct me if I'm wrong, corporate officer, but when we vote at the board on general grant and aid, that's a weighted vote, right?
Is that correct?
Thank you. Sorry, I was not prepared for
sorry.
question.
I believe it is.
I believe that general grant and aid is a participant's weighted vote under section 209.
Yes. So if there is an initiative that the board, because the discretion lies with the board. If there's a grant and we say, well, this fits with only the rural areas, then we can say, okay, this benefits areas A, B, and C, and then areas A, B, and C can use our own pots of money to make up the grant and hand it out. But if it's an initiative that we feel benefits the whole region, then we could use general grant and aid, which I know there's been controversy in the past because the municipality for general grant and aid actually gets a bit of a discount because it's on assessment rather than on population. So I know in the past there's been issues where, well, go talk to city council and get them to give 60%, and then we'll give 30% from the rural areas. Whereas if it comes from general grant and aid, it's more of a 55-45 split or something like that. But when it comes to general grant and aid, the weighted vote applies, which I only get one vote. You get 3, or Director Elliott gets 3, Director Doak gets 4, Director Brander, I think, gets 2, and then the rest of us get 1. So this motion isn't saying that we're handing out money. It's saying, rather than dealing with 8 pots of money, let's deal with 6, because we can achieve the exact same thing. Because if we didn't even have a social planning service, we could give out a grant from all the electoral areas and it would achieve the exact same thing. The motion does say, let's have social planning, those amounts historically be put into general grant and aid. But when we get to the draft 3 budget, I think this board or committee should really look at what those amounts will be. This is simply saying, hey, staff, put those amounts into the comparable amounts. But when we get to draft 3, we could actually say, you know what, general grant and aid is too high. We do think there was a number of items that came from social planning. They predominantly benefited rural areas. So let's increase the electoral area grants and aid to compensate. Because at the end of the day, the discretion does lie with the board. But I am in favor of this first motion because it's going to help simplify the job of staff, and it's going to help eliminate some of the confusion over, you know, trying to balance 8 pools of money and what the benefit is for, when really the question we should be asking ourselves is, who benefits and who pays? I think that makes sense. I'm seeing a oh, okay.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. And I'd just like to follow up on that with a comment to say and Director Gisborne has it exactly how I think about this. There's the pots of money versus the amount we put in each pot. And I think we have unnecessary complication in our current structure, and that has translated into a lot of discussion when we do financial requests. So the staff report outlines the benefits, and the benefits are less administration, you know, less work for staff, less costs, so on, less uncertainty about the stream, so less uncertainty from the applicants of which box do they check, less uncertainty from the staff when they slot things in or make recommendations, and less uncertainty around the table. And yet it hasn't really helped us because many grants have many aspects. These great groups that apply to us have many aspects. So we go into all these contortions to say, well, you know, there's economic aspects of this such and such, and so let's put it into that. And oh no, the social. And the bottom line is, it's actually about who's paying. The bottom line is it's not about those. You can always say there's a social aspect to this thing, or an economic aspect, or a general. The bottom line is who pays. So having the proposed structure here would say there's a pot of everyone. There's a pot for each. The city doesn't need one because they have their own process. And then the second part is how much we put in. So I think that's actually where, and I know there's elements in this agenda about how much money goes in where, and I think that we need to think about, but I think that shouldn't stop us from thinking about the principle here of reducing it to a few pots, and then we look at the net benefits. Like I'll end it there, and for anyone else who hasn't spoken first on this, and I'll pass it back to Director Elliott, and then I'll go back to Director Doak.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for all the comments. I agree that simplifying how we do our grants and aid is a good idea. I don't like this particular motion. I think this is the wrong motion to get the job done. And in order to get to the right motion, I think we need information that supports our motion so that we know the actual impacts of what the motion's going to do. So I think what this motion is trying to do is cancel the social planning envelope altogether and get rid of the economic development envelope. I don't know if there's other envelopes that are also impacted by this that we do grants and aid from. But the bottom line is all the money is gonna come from either only area places and belong to each area, or it's gonna go into general grant and aid. And if they're funds that were normally coming from areas and they go into general grant and aid, who contributes what gets redistributed amongst everybody, and it becomes a decision with a weighted vote. And so there's some other motions later on that look at trying to equalize the who pays, who does what. But there's also an aspect that is the city has a budget of their own somewhere else, and they're doing stuff all the time, and nobody's quantifying how much of what they do helps everybody else. And so it's like the whole process is a lot more complicated than what is being made out. For example, the community forest puts out tons of grant money that is run by the city. And their grant money goes to help everybody. It doesn't just help the city. But there's no vote of you guys on all of that. We just try to do our best. And so I think the way we're set up here has us a little bit over preoccupied for who's paying in, rather than what are the strategic goals that we're trying to meet together and talk about the best place for the money, no matter where it comes from. And we need an overall grant and aid process that's simpler. It's flexible enough that we can, as a board, decide where we want to put it. And we need recognition by all that we are all contributing and we are all benefiting from each other's success. And I've been listening for a while to all the deliberations around this table where people seem to think that each area seems to think they're getting screwed for some reason. And from what I can tell, we're all just trying to do our best to pay for stuff that benefits everybody. And if somebody's homeless in Pell River and getting a service, nobody's going to turn people away from that service that come from somewhere. There is no such thing as a service that directly benefits only one area over another. We are an isolated area working together on all things. And there is no way to isolate benefits to a particular area. And I don't care whether you can, I mean, I hear people making the arguments all the time and I'm like, not so much, but okay. So I think we spend too much time worrying about somebody helping somebody else. And I think we need to stop doing that. I don't think that's helpful. But I do think we need a simpler grant and aid program. And if we are going to do something that rearranges who contributes to the grant and aid and weights heavier on the city, we need to consult with the city. Maybe the city has ideas about how that impacts us or how we can lower our budgets over there to help contribute more over here, because maybe grant and aid over here and not having it at the city is the way to go, but maybe not. So I think this is a bigger conversation and I don't like this motion, and it isn't backed up by any kind of sound reporting or explanations as to what this does. And so we would be making blind decisions to vote for this motion, and I'm not in favor of it.
Thank you. So I guess Director Lennox, and then we'll go back to Director Dout. Director Lennox.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the comments of all the directors, and as you know, looking at the figures as in Area A, the significant difference in the amount of contributions over the last 10 years illustrates to me that I think we've shown a good example previous to me of sharing that burden amongst the whole region. And I'm a firm believer in, as you said, it's usually a regional benefit. When I look through the list of grants that have been issued over 10 years, many of them have little or very little to do with Area A, but they regionally have a big impact. And so I think that what I've seen in my first year about how, to Director Gisborne's point about how we struggle with, we all want to achieve the goal and support whatever the cause is, but we're fiddling around with moving money around when really it's a grant in aid. And so what I see here from the explanation, which I appreciate, is, and some clarity around ECDev still stays with the EA, with the electoral areas. Okay, that simplifies it. It's really the social development side of it, which we have lots more to talk about, that is really the crux of the matter. And I think we can handle it through our deliberations under social planning as well. So I'm in favor of this because, to the point of simplification, that'll work. And we're still going to have the same discussions and goals and agree on that. So thank you.
Okay, so Director Dout, because I said I promised you'd speak next, then we'll go to Director Brander.
You did make a promise.
Yeah.
Director Dout, you can go ahead.
So we got two motions, both of them talk about social planning. And the social planning service is a three-party service, has been a three-party service that involves payments by the city, the regional district, and the Tla'amin Nation.
Point of order, the
Director Dowd, we're on item 9.
CAO would like to jump in.
CAO, so I think it's, yeah.
Okay.
CAO?
Through the chair, for clarification, the Qathet Regional District Social Planning Service is only contributed through electorals A through E.
Yeah.
Now, the tripartite agreement, if you will, is done with Tla'amin Nation, City of Powell River, and through the availability of the URD Social Planning Service.
Okay, thank you. And I think so. We're on 9.2, item 1, which doesn't mention social planning, but
Okay.
it affects it, of course. So, Director Dowd, that's you have the floor.
I just wanted to comment on what you said previously. Is that we're talking about grant funding, and we need to collect some funds so we can do grant funding, and the city doesn't need any because they already have lots of money.
They do?
Okay. And that's news to me. Okay, the city has a huge grant and aid budget, much larger than the regional district's total budget, and makes an effort to do that for as much benefit of the community as possible. And that includes people who wander in from area A or area B or anywhere else in the regional district to get a benefit of that. Not because the city has too much money, because the city is having a struggle right now trying to figure out how to deal with the budgets that we have and how to make the tax increase come in, hopefully somewhere less than 10% for residents of the city. Not 39%, but less than 10%. And to suggest that maybe we can solve some of these problems by, and I look at all of these ones, the social development and the economic and then the grant and aid function, basically as a grant funding possibility and how we select that. And it has an impact on the tax requisition that's going to happen. If we're going to move all these things into the grants in aid function, then it's going to cost more money to the taxpayer in the city of Powell River because they contribute to that funding in the general grants in aid. And that's what I'm concerned about. And I don't see a clear explanation of that in any of these motions.
Thank you. Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to remind people that, with if the municipality were to be included in the general grants and aid, then they also have more control over how the money is spent. I think that might have been mentioned earlier, but we had an issue earlier this year about funding for the CRC, which was eventually moved into general grants and aid so that the municipal directors could vote on it. Prior to that, it was just under the social planning service, which meant there was no voting right. If I got that correct. That's it.
Thank you. Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I'm going to try and be very clear, very simple. We currently have 8 pots of money to pull from to give to applicants. It's confusing for applicants, it's confusing for staff, it's confusing for the board. I hear Director Elliott's points of we should simplify it. The simplest way would to have everything go into general grant and aid. And then the regional district would be like a municipality where everyone pays the same and we give out one chunk of money. That would be the simplest. This motion moves in that direction by eliminating 2 of the pools of social planning and economic development, which the municipality doesn't pay for currently. The issue I'm hearing from Director Dowd is that taking historical grants that came from the electoral areas And moving all of those into general grant and aid means that the municipality would start paying for grants that they historically have not been paying for. And that would only apply to the social planning service. And this is only for adjusting the amounts for draft 3. Maybe it would make sense for an amendment to say social planning grants and economic development grants be adjusted for the electoral area grants and aid for the 2024 draft 3 budget, because then that would be the same amounts of what we had last year, and the amount that the city contributes to wouldn't change at all. We're not talking about eliminating the economic development service. I can't initiate that because Area B is not a participant in the economic development service. Area B could choose to put forward a statutory service review, which would then could be followed up with Area B's application to the ministry to withdraw from the social planning service. But that costs staff time and costs money, and I think it's better to try and fix the issues with the service than simply pulling out. This motion is not increasing the requisition for the city. It's not increasing the requisition for the electoral areas. It is asking staff to restrict the grants to general grant and aid and the electoral area grant and aid. And I'm going to ask staff for some help on an idea, and maybe it'll help us move forward. When we get draft 3, could we get 2 options? The first option, which is what the staff recommended, of social planning grants being moved into general grant and aid. The second option is social planning grants moved into the electoral area grants and aid. The second option that I just referenced would mean there would be no change in what the city contributes from this year to last year. It would be the same thing. Would that be possible to get those 2 options at draft 3, or do we need a motion? And I see direct.
I'll hand it over to Ms. Green in a moment. I'll just mention that in terms of where the money would go from social planning grants, that's our next item on our agenda. So we don't need to change this motion to do that, because we will be considering that very momentarily. And then whatever comes out of that will direct staff of what to do. But I do kind of agree that having the options would be interesting. Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. I think it would be good if the motion could be revised so that I'm clear. And just, the way that it could be amended would be that staff proposed 2 options in draft 3 of the proposed 2024 to 2028 budgets for the general grants and aid, local grants and aid services, to reallocate social planning either to electoral area grants and aid or to general grants and aid, as Director Gisborne proposed. I think it would be good to have the motion amended.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. So you're doing that? Go ahead.
Actually, I have to thank alternate Director Scott, or Director Scott, who just pointed out item 9.3 on our agenda, which comes later, reads that the committee recommend to the board that the board assign all social planning related grant funding through general grant and aid. So that's what Director Lennox had pointed out. So the motion we have on the floor right now is to say we will take money from general grant and aid or the electoral grant and aid. And later on in the agenda, we're going to have a motion of where social planning should be reallocated. So yes, I think there is a motion for which pot we should allocate that, but that actually comes later. So I think the problem we have right now is we're actually discussing multiple motions at the same time, and therefore we're confused. So
Okay, so to bring it on track right now, and I see Director Elliott, we're trying to decide whether to basically have only, eliminate social planning grants and economic development. Economic development would clearly go into the EAs that fund them, and the social planning would be decided at the next item on the agenda. Director Elliott?
Thanks. I thought the wording that Ms. Greenan proposed, asked for us to amend the motion to was clearer and better worded than the current wording that we have for that purpose. And so I would like to move that amendment if we had a,
Okay, so
and it means exactly what the same thing, but is clearer wording and less confusing.
Yep, that's fine. Is there a seconder for that amendment?
Sure.
Director Gisborne. Okay, so discussion on the
Claire,
amendment. That's
before we go, thank you, Chair.
Board Officer, yeah. Before we jump down.
Before we go to an amendment, I just want to have clarity. Are we amending the second clause?
I believe it's to change the second clause, and I'm not sure the exact words, but it's to for the budgets to be adjusted for two options, for the budgets to be adjusted and two options be provided.
We'll
for that
substitute a new
adjustment.
clause.
Yeah.
We'll be substituting a new clause.
Yes, I think that would be better. That draft 3 would include two options for how the budgets would be adjusted, something like that. Director Gisborne, and hopefully you can wrap this up. We're at 3. I just want to point out we're at 3 o'clock, so if we want to get through a couple other items, we need to move a bit concisely. So new information.
Yeah, concisely. I think procedurally, we're talking about 9.31 at the same time as 9.21. And I think a good way forward would be to split 9.21 into two parts, deal with the first part, which is just saying we'll do all the grant funding through general grant and aid and the electoral area grants and aid. And then the second part of 9.21 actually ties in to 9.31, which is the motion that Director Elliott has moved and Ms. Greenan has pointed out, because those two motions are connected, whereas the first one, I think we can just split it. But should we just take a 5-minute recess, because this is getting
Okay, well, we can let's first deal with this. We got two things happening on
the next meeting.
We have a amendment, so I think we first need to vote on the amendment, and then if someone wants to move a split, I mean, I personally think we can just do it and move forward and try to get through this. But if I think we first need to deal with the amendment. We have an amendment on the table. We have the intent of it. The corporate officer is coming up with the words on it, but we know what the intent is, which is to change the second clause to ask for the next draft to have two options. So that's the amendment. And is there any discussion on this amendment? Let's just try to be really focused here on this. I can't see the boardroom, so is there any discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question on the amendment, sorry. All in favor? Opposed? None carried. Okay, opposed.
Director Doubt's opposed.
Yep, Director Doubt's opposed. So we have this amended motion before us. So do we have any discussion on the amended motion? Okay, if I see none, then I will call the question on the amended motion. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. And we'll talk a bit more about this.
Doubt's opposed.
Director Doubt's opposed. Thank you. And we had a request for a short recess. So why don't we keep it to just a couple minutes, and we'll resume as soon as we can get back to the table.
Okay, thank you, Chair. We're back in session.
Okay, thank you. And noting that we're at 3:05, what I'm going to suggest is that we deal with the second item, which I think maybe not that time sense or won't take that much time. And items 2 and 3 in this section, I would suggest perhaps we want to postpone them to the next Finance Committee meeting. I don't believe they're time sensitive. We can ask staff when we get to them. So we're on the second one, which is about the wording, so that the committee recommends that the board direct staff incorporate the following language into the grants and aid policy. And there's a section that changes 2 things. One is the moved by Director Gisborne, seconded by Director Lennox. Is there discussion on this item? I'll just mention, Director Brander.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to mention that there's no need of a motion, but if everything could be shown on a per capita basis as well, not just by area, when the staff takes that into consideration.
And I'll just mention that this is, I really appreciate this language. I think it helps us keep it broad, as Director Elliott mentioned earlier, about keeping the focus on what we're trying to do and getting information so that we can find this balance. Director Elliott?
So I thought we were gonna have a process for reviewing our grant and aid program. And these motions all seem to be coming out of the blue without being part of the proper process. So I'm not in favor of us just throwing motions around willy-nilly when we're trying to do another process to review the grant and aid program in general. This is not a motion required for us in the financial plan. It doesn't do anything to our financial planning process. It's a recommendation around policies that we're reviewing in a separate process. I think it's out of order here in our finance committee. I don't think it should be here. I'm not in favor of this motion outside of the process of the review that we've already recommended. And so I think we're gonna hinder our ability to do a proper review of the grant and aid program by starting to make recommendations around the policy without it being in an overall contextual broader view of the whole program. So I don't know why it's here. I think it's out of order and I'm not in favor of this motion.
Director Gisborne and then Director Dowd.
Yeah, I was hoping we could slam through this one, but in the staff report at its meeting of September 27th, 2023, the board adopted the following motions. And I'm not going to go through all of them because for time sensitivity, those motions were passed by the board to give direction to staff to ask for a report with feedback on how to amend these policies. And that is in the staff report based on the direction given by the board. I understand why staff have brought these recommendations forward because we have a financial plan. And if we want to adjust how we hand out grants and we say, okay, you can only get it from the electoral areas or general grant and aid, but we pass a budget with a whole bunch of money sitting in social planning, well, that doesn't really then make sense because once we pass the budget, we can't move money from social planning to general grant and aid or area B grant and aid. Like, as I understand it, that's kind of illegal. And we don't want to get our manager of financial services into trouble for such a thing. So this is the finance committee being proactive in our planning, our finance department, following the direction of the board given back in September. So that way we can adjust our financial plan that we're planning to have adopted at the end of February. If we still have some issues, we can still have a discussion around the financial plan in March, but our deadline is the end of March. we have to adopt a financial plan. We have to adopt a budget. And based on the direction that we have given to our staff back in September, this staff report is in alignment with the direction that was previously given. It is going to be a process to adjust our policies and to adjust how we evaluate applications. We're not evaluating the applications yet. That I think is kind of like item point 3 about long-term funding, and we're going to get more grant applications. The motion before us is getting our staff to adjust the policy to be in line with the motion that we just passed. So that way, when we get draft 3 of our financial plan, it's in alignment with the direction that the board has given our staff in September. Does that make sense? I think it does.
Yeah.
Okay, so, so I'm in support of this motion, and yeah.
Director Doubt.
Yeah. No, I'm not sure I'm right, but what I think we're talking about is 9.2, the second half of 9.21, which talks about at the end adjusting the grants and aid service and adjusting it to deal with the revised funding model. So,
Director Doubt, no, we
no? What are we talking about?
9.21 we pass with changing that second clause to ask for 2 options instead of just doing a general adjustment.
We have the language up on the board so we all know what
okay, corporate officer, can we see the so with a second, so the first, so 9.21 we passed and with a revised version, and the second clause was modified, and the corporate officer will bring up. What we're talking about is 9.22 is the motion on the table, which is the language to change the language in the grants and aid policy effectively to ask each time for a summary of grants from the last 10 years and to talk about, you know, the kind of how benefit is to be viewed broadly. Now, if we want to have a big discussion on this, I think maybe we need to postpone this one along with the others, but if we're okay with it, we can carry on, but you know, so that's right. Highlighted is the one we're.
Now I know what we're talking about.
Yeah,
I have
thank
nothing
you.
else to say on it.
Okay.
Forward if anybody wants to, because we're already within 20 minutes of the start time of our next meeting.
Yes. So so if there's if there's no further discussion, is there further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call
I
the
would
question.
motion to postpone.
Okay. Oh, motion to postpone. Is there a seconder to the
We're not
motion?
talking about it because we don't have time.
Or is there a seconder for the motion to postpone? Seeing none. Seconded. Okay, so I'm gonna discussion on this. Seeing none, I will call the question. Oh, Director Doubt, Director Gisborne.
And Director Elliott. I'll give Director Elliott because she was the mover.
Okay. Okay.
So my original point was that this particular motion doesn't actually require to do anything for our budget. The first motion was, we don't need this at this point in time. And I think that it deserves a conversation with other possible ideas that may be different than this particular proposal. I'm not particularly opposed to this. My point is that we're focused on the budget in this meeting. We don't have a ton of time to talk about this or kick around options. And this isn't necessary for our budget or our draft budget. And so I think we should postpone it and move on to something that's more important so that we can give consideration to policy changes the time that it deserves, which we don't have here today.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further, briefly, Director Gisborne?
Yeah, I think the board has the time if it wishes to. We're having long meetings again. We had an important planning committee meeting this morning about housing and our housing needs assessment, which is very important.
Please keep it on the topic of postponing this.
On the topic, this is why I actually don't think we should postpone this. I was happy to vote in favor, but if we want to have more discussion on the motion, then I think that the finance committee should take the time to have the discussion on the issue at hand. There has been a summary of 10-year period from previous grants. My question then is to the manager of financial services. Does the staff need this motion to pass before we adopt our budget at, you know, the deadline end of March? Or is this something that can be postponed? Or how time sensitive is this motion?
Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair. No, this motion isn't time sensitive because this part of the motion deals with the policy, and the policy will come up when you see the first intake of the grant and aid requests. So it doesn't necessarily need to be moved for us to move on with the financial plan.
And I will be in support of postponement for the sake of good conduct amongst all directors.
Let's try to get to the vote. So on the vote to postpone, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of postponing this item? Okay, carried. On to the next ones. And I would suggest I would recommend someone make a motion to postpone the other two items. Director Gisborne.
I'll postpone number 3, but not number 4.
Okay, so number 3's got a motion to postpone. Is there a seconder for that? Seems to be something that needs a lot more thought.
I don't actually know what 3, 4, 5 we're talking about.
So item 3 is recommended is multi-year funding agreements for the following organizations. There's a list of organizations.
There is no 9.5. That's why I got confused.
No, it's
9.2.3.
It's item 3, sub item 3 of 9.2. So it's the multi-year, considering multi-year agreements with the organizations. So it's been a motion to postpone that. It's been seconded by alternate director Scott. Discussion on this, seeing none, call the question. All those in favor of postponing? None opposed, carried. So the single year grant. Now, if it's going to be a long discussion, because we have 14 minutes, I would suggest we postpone this as well, because we do not need a big discussion or a lengthy discussion. But Director Gisborne.
I'll just move the motion because I think number 4 is simple.
Okay.
Line, March 31st. Doesn't need a ton of discussion.
Is there a seconder for that? Director Lennox, discussion on that. Okay, seeing none. Director Scott.
Yeah.
Director Scott. And if there's going to be lengthy discussion, I would suggest we postpone it, please. So alternate Director Scott, go ahead.
I would oppose having one intake date because most service organizations have a fiscal year end of March 31st, and they will have their ideas and their plans coming a day too late.
Okay, Director Elliott.
I'm also in opposition to the motion. I don't see any benefit to having one intake per year for the people who you're trying to benefit. I think it might be easier administratively for our own staff, but I think it has a huge impact on the people that we're trying to provide money to and support. And so I'm against the motion.
Okay, any other discussion? Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I like the single date grant intake, though myself, I would actually prefer to see end of February. That way, once we get closer to adopting our budget, we can actually get a bit of more of an idea from the applications on whether or not we are within or outside of the targets of our grants when we do our budget. Because this is where we've run into problems in the past, is we adopt a budget, we get a bunch of grant requests, and the requests exceed the amount that we've allocated. And taking a look at the last 10 years of grant requests, we see some organizations are consistent. They ask for the same amount every year. And then there's other organizations that are like a one-time, hey, we need some money. And so myself, I'm in favor of a single intake. I would like to see it earlier, but hearing now that there's a lot more discussion around the table, and I think I'm going to recall the words of Ellie Mina, which said you shouldn't be making rush decisions or decisions under duress, but it seems like that's what we're doing today. So I'll move that we postpone this matter until the next Finance Committee meeting.
Okay, seconded by Director Elliott. Discussion on this, Director Doubt, postponing this item on single intake versus 2.
Seem to be getting on a roll to postpone things to our next Finance Committee meeting. I guess with the assumption that somehow the next Finance Committee meeting is going to have a shorter agenda than this one. And I would say it's probably going to be twice as long, and we're going to come with the same time problems that we have. So, maybe we want to think about which way we want to be inconvenienced. Do we want to postpone everything until the next meeting which will end up with us postponing stuff until the meeting after that? Or do we want to adjourn this meeting until after the board meeting, and then we can talk about it? And we put ourselves in this position of having all these meetings on the same day, but you know, we can't just keep saying we'll deal with it next month.
I agree, but some of these items are time sensitive, and we can maybe get through 2 more time sensitive things if we can keep our comments very concise. So I see Director Gisborne, please. We got 10 minutes. We can do a couple things before then.
I saw Manager of Financial Services, Linda Greenan, raise her hand. I was wondering if she has input on time sensitivity on this item.
Thank you for that, Ms. Greenan.
Thank you, Chair, through the chair. The one thing that is time sensitive with these last 3 motions is that if the board wants to make these changes, I would recommend that these changes wait until after the first intake of the grant and aid applications, just because we do start to advertise. We have to advertise for the March 31st deadline that's coming up. So those advertisements have to go out shortly. And that would mean that those groups would start to work on their applications, and they would be looking at the applications with the two deadlines, with those in mind. So if we change I would recommend, if we make these changes, that these, if they don't happen now before the ads go out, that they wait until that these changes be incorporated into the policy after the first intake.
Thank you for that. So we're voting on motion to postpone. Director Gisborne, please be brief. We got 9 minutes.
We have as much time as our committee wants to take, and we've decided as a group to have our meetings like this so we can wear it collectively. We've heard from our Manager of Financial Services. The original motion was to postpone until February, but since February will be after the advertising deadline, then if we do want to postpone, we're going to need to postpone until April. No. Because that's after or when is the first intake? Is that
Corporate Officer? I see your hand.
I would suggest a motion to postpone is better to go to the next meeting than postponing to several meetings away. I think that might not follow what we should do. So okay. Thank you, Chair.
I don't even know what we're doing anymore.
Okay, so are we okay to vote on this?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. Motion to postpone until the next meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried. We postponed. Okay.
That was 2 opposed.
Oh, 2 opposed. Sorry, 2. Who was opposed? Okay.
Director Doughton and Director Gisborne.
Okay, Director Doughton and Director Gisborne. Thank you. So I'm trying to rush here a bit, but we've got 2 more items, and I think for the next item, which is 9.3 review of social planning service, I would suggest strongly that the first one be postponed. Item 9.31 be postponed because of our previous motion recommendation for options. This one seems a bit redundant, and it could be dealt with once we have options before us.
9.31.
Director Corporate Officer.
Just thank you, Chair. You could just not consider it.
Okay, we just won't consider it. Okay, is the board okay if we don't?
If it is redundant, if it is redundant, it will be captured.
Okay, so I won't consider that unless someone is okay with that. So item 9.32, which is 29,200 for the social planning service for initiatives related to wages. Are we okay making a motion on that one? Does someone want to do that? That seems to be something we could get into our next draft. Director Brander, someone second that? Director Gisborne. So this is to set aside 29,200. Director Elliott.
Thank you. I think that's better handled through options as well, because it presupposes that we agree to the movement of the social planning, and we haven't made that choice yet. We're looking at options rather than that, and so that could be part of proposing the option where the social planning envelope is moved in the financial plan. So I think it anyway.
Yeah, and I believe this is actually about the staff wage part of the social planning service, but CAO had some comments on that.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, technically you cannot, because what you're discussing about reallocating is grant funding. And this is about wages. And if we want to support any type of wages, it has to come through the social planning service.
So it's a
About
separate.
holding is a separate issue. This is about keeping the option to co-fund a social planner.
Okay, so so let me understand. Sorry, I'm asking a question about understanding. So the money required to support wages isn't in our current budget, so it would be a new item then?
CAO?
Through the chair. No, Director Elliott, we've always had a portion of wages in this service to fund things like the social planner.
Okay, so it was part of our already.
It was all part of the big number that was in social planning.
Okay.
A portion of that was for wages. The other portion of it was utilized for grant funding.
So it's already there then?
Exactly.
So why are we doing a motion for something that's already there?
So is this redundant then, or does it help?
For wages.
For wages. So this will clarify for staff.
You just said it's already there for wages.
This would clarify for staff that the continuation of holding that money. So I think it would be more efficient to just pass it. If it's redundant, it won't do anything, but it helps staff understand that we want to hold that money there. Okay, so Director Gisborne, this is on that motion to hold 29,200 for social planning related to wages.
Yeah, how long have we been waiting for the city to get a social planner?
Can we focus on the question? So I think we got 6 minutes, and I think that's
for
not
information, Chair, from our staff to determine whether or not we should allocate
Carry on.
the funding or not.
Please be efficient. It was a year and a half. The report showed 2022, the social planning position was vacated.
And has the city given any indication on whether or not they're going to fill that position?
So that's for the corporate officer, CAO?
Through the chair, not yet, but I believe coming up on one of your next meetings is the letter to write to the city.
And if we choose to go with the social planning position ourselves, what would you anticipate the requisition amount would be?
Through the chair, if you're considering the other option indicated in the report, option 3, it would be significantly more than this.
And that's what I think that the finance committee should be considering, is whether or not we allocate $29,000 in the budget, partner with the city, or if we are committed to the social planning position, then we would increase the amount to what the staff have recommended. Otherwise, we'll be in the same position as we were last year, which is taxing the public or taking $30,000 from the public to sit in the bank account doing nothing in the hopes that the city partners with us. So if the committee is committed to the social planner position, then I think we can go it on our own. But if we're not committed, then we set the value to 0. Or we can take the middle road.
Through the chair, the option is in the report to go full blown. That's a board decision. This recommendation is to do at least what we've been doing on the side of our desks without a social planner for the tri-part agreement.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the motion before us. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? 1 opposed. Director Gisborne carried. And we're on to the last item in our agenda, 9.5, which is the committee recommending to the board to include $64,045 to implement the priority actions identified in the 2024-2026 accessibility plan. Director Gisborne, Director Brander seconded. Is there any discussion on this item?
It's easy. That's all from me.
Seeing none, I'll just say this is really great to see, and I'm, and thank you staff for bringing this forward. I think it looks really good to me, and I'll ask again if there's any other discussion, but if there is none, then I think it's because everyone's supporting it wholeheartedly. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? None carried unanimously. So that's great. Thank you for that. No new business. And lastly, question period. So, Mr. Lindsay, having some questions.
Yes, I do. I know we're time pressed here, Chair, so I'll be brief. With regard to Financial Plan Draft 2, it is evident to me that the City of Powell River is facing an increase in requisition of about 36%. The electoral areas A to D are less than 20%, and I think E is around 25%. The increase in city requisition is about $1 million. I'm wondering why the requisitions weren't applied more equitably and why the city's number is so much higher than the electoral areas.
I'll pass that to Ms. Greenan, but the short answer is it's just the nature of who pays and participates in the services that resulted in that increase. And because the lion's share of that increase is waste management that everyone contributes to, the city's goes up compared to the other services that the city does not participate in. But Ms. Greenan may have a more clear answer. Ms. Greenan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. If I could direct you to page 24 of the, if I could draw your attention to page 24 of the report. On that report, you'll see an annual requisition comparison for the City of Powell River and all the electoral areas. And that shows how, that comparison shows how that increased requisition is allocated amongst each area. So it is allocated based on assessment. For example, of that $1.5 million requisition increase for waste management, $817,486 is allocated to the City of Powell River, and to Area A, $204,900 is allocated to Area A, etc. So it is actually allocated equitably amongst the participants that participate in those services. It isn't taken on by one area. It all depends on who participates. So I think that's a good few pages to look at when you're looking at those increases.
I thank the manager very much for the guidance. I shall turn to those pages and read them thoroughly. That was my question, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Galinsky. Is there any other Director Dowd has a hand up? Yep.
Just want to add a little bit to the previous answers to Mr. Galinsky's questions. I draw his attention to the actual dollar figure per $100,000 of assessed value for each one of the areas, and that changes as well. It's quite different than the impression you get from the percentages, because the dollar values for each depend on the services that are available in each area, and each of the electoral areas actually have more services that they rely on from the regional district than the city does, and that influences the percentages. So I think if you look at the dollar value per $100,000 of assessed value change, you'll see that that's much more equitably distributed.
Quite right. And just to illustrate that, the waste management line in all those tables by area, the tax rate per 100,000 is the same for the waste management service for all the areas. So we're all paying the same. Every area pays the same per 100,000. And then that rolls out based on assessed values.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Director Dowd. So that's the end of question period, no in-camera period. We're adjourned.